Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today, our first artist talk of a series. My name is Seth Feman. I'm the Deputy Director for Art and Interpretation and the Curator of Photography at the Chrysler Museum. As I say, this is the first of our visual artist talks, and I want to be sure to invite you all to join us for the rest of the series. And actually, we have two series that we're about to launch. The first is a series of 5 talks with artists such as choreographer Brandon Fernandez, video artist Sarah Chujing, stained glass artist Judith Schechter, and photographers Mark Peterson and Brian Palmer. For each of these, curators from the Chrysler will go live with the artist to talk about their creative practice. And although today's talk is part of that series, it's sort of a launch of the series, so we've treated this one as free and open to all. The 5 additional talks will be $15 per program for non-members and free for members. We'll also begin a series of 5 curator talks, which will launch a little bit later in the summer and into the fall, in which you can join me and my incredible colleagues as we draw on the Chrysler's collection to talk about our area of specialization. The talks will cover contemporary African art, the archaeology of ancient glass, taxidermy in American art, historical photographic techniques, and an overview of our Flemish masters. These talks will also be free for members and $15 per talk, or $75 for the entire series. As a reminder, I would urge you to think about becoming a member as well. As a member, you get all of these programs for free, plus any number of discounts on classes, invitations to previews, and other sorts of benefits. Doing so starts at only $75 for households, so it's quite a deal. You can visit our website, chrysler.org, to find out more about both the series and how to join as a member. And I thank you in advance for your support, which is more valuable now than ever before. So I urge you to visit us there on the website. The last thing I want to mention before we begin is that there are more than 100 of you out there listening today, participating. So for right now, we're going to keep you all muted, but please feel free to ask questions at any point via the chat at the bottom of your screen. My colleagues who are standing by to help us out, they will keep all the questions organized, and during the Q&A, they'll help feed them to me so we can make sure that they're being asked. You don't have to hesitate. You can ask questions at any time, in other words, and we'll keep those cataloged. So just pop them up when you think of them. So today, without any further ado, I'm honored to introduce you all to Dawit N.M, whose exhibition is currently and finally on view until August 16th at the Chrysler. Dawit N.M's story has many beginnings, including his early years in Ethiopia, his move to Hampton Roads as a kid, his relationship with his family and his church, and his emerging career as a film director. And I'd say now it's very much an established career as a film director. The Eye That Follows, the name of the exhibition, weaves the threads of his life together through images and music videos made in Hampton Roads, New York, LA, and Ethiopia. His exhibition chronicles the threads of his life in a multimedia meditation on themes like seeing and not seeing, movement and immobility, and loss and devotion. I urge you to come out and check out the exhibition for yourself, or check out the conversation that we're having today. Eventually, Dawit has also agreed to produce an installation video, which we'll share with people who want to view it virtually. So with that, welcome, Dawit. I'm glad you're here.
Thank you for having me, Seth. And thank you for everyone that's joined and tuning in. I'm super excited for this, and I'm finally, I'm excited that it's finally out and, open to the public.
Absolutely.
So, yes.
Thanks, Dawit. So why don't you just start us off at the very beginning? I know the place where we're going to start is really, really at the very beginning. So why don't you just jump ahead?
Yeah, definitely. So basically, this is me when I was a kid back in Ethiopia, and just to give you guys a rundown of my childhood and how that influenced this whole show, The Eye That Follows. I was born in Ethiopia, and at the age of 6, nearing 7, I moved to the States, to Norfolk, Virginia. But in that 7 years in Ethiopia, a lot happened that influenced the way I saw. and especially this one incident where I remember my mother told me not to play on this one tree, and of course, as a kid, I was curious and I really wanted to, to play on the tree just because she told me not to. And so I played on the tree, and I ended up getting an eye infection. And this eye infection was so bad that every morning I would wake up and I wasn't able to open my eyes. And so for like a good month or two, my mother would have to help me to the bathroom and wash the eye crust out of my eye. And that was a very fundamental moment for me for everything, just because it made me realize the privilege I had in the in seeing. And that's something that we don't really, that's something we kind of take for granted just because we always have it. But once it's removed from you, you really realize the beauty in seeing. And so yeah, like that played an important part. And these two images which are at the show are family photos of my mother, who when she was pregnant with me, and my father, he was carrying me during a trip out of the water. And I remember seeing these photos when I was making this photo book called "Don't Make Me Look Like the Kids on TV." And it was during the process when I was scavenging through multiple family photos, and I remember coming across these two photos, and I don't know what it was, but there was like an element of quietness in it, in which I don't know. For me, it felt like in the image with my mother, I just heard the wind just in the background, and then with the image of my father, I just heard the water as we came out from the lake or whatever. And ever since then, I was really interested into finding out who took these photos. And sadly, we don't know who took these photos. And ever since then, I kind of built this narrative in my head that maybe there was this photographer in the family that no one knew about, and in ways that that inspired the title for The Eye That Follows, as if like there's this photographer, like there's this eye, or photographer that's been in the family for generations, and we've never known about it.
I've
So yeah.
heard you tell this story now dozens of times, and every time it makes me think of something different, which is one of the reasons why I really appreciate your work. But the story about your mom washing your eye is a very personal story, and it's about how you learn to appreciate vision. But one of the things that is fundamental to that story that doesn't get emphasized quite as much is how somebody else's devotion to you helps you reacquire your vision. It's
Hmm.
your mom's love that motivates this and gently removes this problem from your eyes that you can see. And you get that here too with this pair of photographs as well, that um, there's this desire to see, but there's help along the way, that somebody is helping you see. And that's one of the things that excites me so much about the show altogether, is that it's very much a personal vision of yours, but it keeps on encouraging people to look again, or helps show them a way to look. It's sort of like you've almost in some ways taken on your own mother's role in the exhibition itself.
Hmm. Definitely. And I'll talk about it a bit later in the presentation, but even though I don't take that many pictures of my mother in all the photos, she's played a big part, just because she's always in the back of my head. And even the way I think and the way I question a lot of things, is the result of her teaching me, and her raising me.
Yeah.
So with everything I do, my mother will always be there for me. Yeah.
No, that's great segue into your next section, if you want to.
Definitely. Yeah. So family. So family is an important thing for me in my work. And when I first started doing photography, they really helped me figure out my visual style, and then also approaching photography in a way that was respectable to the subject, and carrying myself and representing them through dignity and with respect, to be honest. And I'll begin with my my little brother and sister. This is my little brother in this image, and I realized that through taking images of my younger brother and my sister, I was able to really have fun and just be curious and really experiment with everything. And it really helped me create a visual style that I liked. That combined with and this is the image of my sister, and that combined with the experience of capturing my father. And unlike my little brother and sister, in which I captured them in a way that I was trying to manipulate the image. When I was taking photos of my father, I didn't want to manipulate anything, and I really just wanted to show the honest truth and the way he was living it, the way he lived, and the way he looked. Just because the mirror manipulated too many things, and I felt that if I took the picture, I would be able to give him a proper portrayal of like how his physical actually is. And later on, eventually, those two worlds started to merge together, and the ideas and learnings from taking images of my brother and my sister merged with the ideas of taking photos of my father. And so the when I would take images of my siblings, I knew I would be manipulating in so many ways that I became aware of how images can be easily manipulated. And so when I was taking images of my father, I redacted a lot of things. I made the images black and white. I refrained from doing any crazy angles. And then also, I wasn't, I tried not to capture the intense moment and rather the result of that intense moment. And that really helped me because I remember there was this one time when my father, and this is back in, I want to say like in 2016 or 2015, he was on the wheelchair, and he fell on the ground. And back then this was a thing that happened like every day, like at least like once or twice a day. So it was kind of norm. And rather than going to him and to his aid, I quickly grabbed my camera and went to take a picture of him. And at that moment when I was taking that picture, I realized how this wasn't helping him at all, but rather helping myself. And even that I had to question because I was exploiting him just for my personal gain. And unlike the other photos which documented his weight loss, the scars from all the falls, and then also to like his medical journey, this image didn't really do much for him other than like humiliate him. And I really had to question myself and ask myself, what led me to even think this was an ethical way of making an image. And with that I realized it was all the imagery I saw, and it's what I thought good photography was. With me saying this, I think about that one photo of that kid, the starving kid, right next to the vulture, and that whole story behind the photographer and how he suffered, how he ended up committing suicide because of that photo. But prior to the suicide, he was awarded um, photo awards for that image and that work. And it really made me question what good photography was at
It
that moment.
makes me think a lot about, your brother and your sister have come to the galleries. I know you brought other family members as well. And it's been really, really nice to get to meet them. And
Mm-hmm.
I asked your brother the other day, how he feels about seeing his own photograph on the wall of the museum, and like what's that like? Is it weird to
Mm-hmm.
see it there? But I didn't ask him about how it feels to see the images of your dad, which
Mm-hmm.
like the image that we're looking at right now. Um, in some ways, it's a very adoring image, right? It's very intimate, it's very personal. But I hear you loud and clear that you're constantly questioning yourself about the ethics behind it, which seems right to always ask about as a photographer. But I wonder if as we were talking about before, your mom has helped you regain your vision when you were a kid. Do you look
Mm-hmm.
to your family for advice or for thoughts? Do they give you feedback when you're presenting your work or thinking it through? Are
Mm-hmm.
you in a vacuum? Are you sort of mulling these over alone? Sort of
Mm-hmm.
how does that part of the creative process work for you?
Yeah. To be honest, for a long time, I was trying to make beautiful work that to get my parents' approval for pursuing art. And I come from a household where they were expecting me to be an engineer, a doctor, or a lawyer. So for a long time, the interaction with my art and my family was trying to get their approval.
Yeah.
Well, with my parents and with my brother and sister, it was just more of it was a different way of hanging out with them rather than playing the games. We would just take photos, and that's why the images with them are so they're just so abstract, just because we were just acting like kids and just experimenting and seeing what we could do.
Yeah.
And even with taking images of my father, I started to incorporate some of the rules I set for myself with the images of that I would take of him, with the
Uh,
images I took of my siblings. And I told myself I couldn't manipulate. Everything would have to be in camera, and all the manipulation would need to be in camera, and I can't do any Photoshop or anything. And that really helped me. That restriction helped me it freed me up by really trying to push the boundaries of what an image could be without the process of all the photo manipulation processes that
Yeah.
you know
Yeah. Somehow the
entailed.
restrictions force creativity.
Yeah, and to be honest, that's what my process is. I love working like in a box, and within that box I try to be as creative as possible. Hmm.
Yeah,
Definitely.
I think you're probably going to touch on it later, so we could go forward. But I know you talk about boredom in that way as well. That boredom is
Yeah.
you. Yeah.
Hmm.
Why don't you show us a few more images, and I'm sure that that'll come up as well.
Definitely, yeah. And so this is an image of my sister, and again, just trying to see what a portrait could be, and just having fun with it, to be honest. And an image of my father when we went to Ethiopia, and this was back in March of 2017. We went to Ethiopia, me and him, to help him seek, spiritual rehabilitation, to see if that would help. Just because everything that we were doing here in the States wasn't really helping him, and so we went on a trip to Ethiopia to see if that would help. Sadly, it didn't do much. It didn't really help him that much. But during the time he was there, he really did enjoy his stay. So, which is a good thing. And even seeing these images together, my brother and my sister and my father, it creates an interesting thing. And I can't stop thinking of my mother. And speaking of my mother,
Hmm.
this image, which is at the show, and it's called Light Within. I feel like it's the perfect portrayal of her, just because I don't like I don't think it would do her justice, her presence in my life and her presence in my art justice, by documenting it in a way that that seems more like the way I documented my father, or even documenting it in a way that's super abstract. But it felt like a combination of both, where when I took this photo, it was a pure accident, and it was like a documentation of an abstract moment. And I think about this, I'm like, I was never looking for this image, but I think this image was looking for me to, like, set up the best scenario for this accident to happen, because this image was a complete accident.
Yeah, it's one of the most striking images in the show to me, because it's the kind of image that, I'm sure people looking at this at home on their computers, it reads as, it can read as like a kind of ominous image, like it's just dark on dark, like you can't see your mom's face at all. It's just a silhouette. And yet when you see it in life, that is not the mood at all. When you look at this, it is one of devotion and affection, even though there's this obscuring quality. It's about presence more than it is about absence, which it's, you have to kind of take my word for it, I think, because it doesn't come across on the screen. But
Hmm.
you use abstraction in that way. And I know that that comes up in some of the church images as well, that there are these moments, and it really comes up in all of the works in the show, that you're kind of leveraging abstraction to create a mood that is, it slows things down and entices you to kind of be patient and to look a little bit more. And I think this is a real crucial example of that, because if you look really carefully when you're in the show, you can like barely make out the contours of your mom's face. Like you can barely see it, but here it's just the outline. And the more you look, the more the image gives up. And the more you care to look, the more it seems to care back, which is sort of unsettling, but it's actually very moving when you're in the space.
Hmm. I'm so glad you said that too, because with my approach to everything, both photography and film, is to at the surface level have it look beautiful and look you know easy on the eye and everything. But if the more you sit with it, the more you see. And I really do want to reward the viewer with the more time they spend, the more things they will see within the image. And speaking of boredom, so my this is for, like, at the start of my photography career, a lot of it was spent in this church. And it's this Ethiopian Orthodox church in Norfolk, Virginia, right next to the Virginia Zoo. And there I learned the possibilities of boredom and, like, the beauty of boredom, to be honest. Just because for hours I would just be taking the same traditional photo, and I I asked myself, I'm like, why am I not experimenting when I'm in church compared to, like, when I'm outside of church? And I realized it was because I thought I would be wrong to capture a spiritual place with abstraction. And once I got away from that mindset, it really freed me, and it really had me questioning a lot of things. One of the things being, like, what is the camera seeing that I'm not seeing? And
Mhm.
then that question eventually evolved to, what am I not seeing? And yeah, and that really did help me just open up just a whole lot of a set of questions for me whenever I'm going about life, to be honest.
Yeah.
And even with this image here, this is one of the I think this is like a week into, or the first time I try to experiment with photography within the church. And the meaning behind this, if you really want to know, I'll tell you one on one. But even like I'm looking at this image and seeing, I'm so glad I started experimenting within the church, just because it gives it a different layer, and I'm able to appreciate it even more. And then also again with that question, what is the camera seeing that I'm not seeing?
Yeah. Yeah. It's a good story that people have to come to you individually to ask.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm. And then even with this image here, a lot of people think this is from a violent situation, but really it's an annual holiday that the Ethiopian Orthodox Church celebrates, called Meskel, and it happens every September, the end of September. And it's just a celebration. And I remember, a lot of my friends seeing this image, and they kept asking me. They were like, "Hey, is this where was this taken? Like, what was happening here?" And I was just like, "Hey, everybody was just celebrating." And so, yeah, I
Mhm.
really love this image. And then even just since, like, I would be taking so many images of the same thing at church, it made me keen to seeing, finding those decisive moments, and that would eventually help me with other projects. And the other project being Don't Make Me Look Like the Kids on
Yeah.
TV.
Great. Yeah.
And Don't Make Me Look Like the Kids on TV, it's this photo book I made back in March of 2017 in Ethiopia. And I made it along with this other project called Tesfa, which in Amharic it means hope. And that project was focused on documenting my father's spiritual rehabilitation and his stay in Ethiopia. And on the side, I was doing this, and this one is filled with color.
Yeah.
And the title comes from when I was with my cousin, and I was about to take his portrait, and right before I took his portrait, or right before I was going to take his portrait, he told me, "Don't make me look like the kids on TV." And I remember hearing that, and I felt enraged that a child has they even have to think about the way they're represented outside of their country. And I don't know, like, I realized at that moment my purpose within photography and film. And I realized another thing too within this project, and that being the interesting dynamic when the subject acknowledges the photographer and the camera, and even the audience. Even with the title, "Don't Make Me Look Like the Kids on TV," the subjects know how they're being perceived, and they don't want to be perceived that way. They want to be perceived in an honest way. Not saying the way the imagery of Ethiopia and mainstream isn't honest, but it's not the whole truth, and it's rather the single story narrative. And it's Ethiopia is more complex than that, and it has both good and bad. And even with just mainstream media, period, I feel like a lot of it focuses on one-sided things, rather than letting people know that these characters are really complex, and really working to try to show that. So yeah.
Yeah, and this comes up throughout your work too. I think it's really stark in the project from Ethiopia in particular, projects from Ethiopia in particular, but it comes up throughout your work that you really are trying to do what's at fundamental core what photographers do, which is try to help the subject tell their own story, which is always an impossible task, right? Because you're seeing it through your eyes, but through collaboration and connection and intimacy, especially with your family and your loved ones, there's a kind of way to be collaborative and to help someone tell their own story rather than telling for them or telling instead of them. Seems to
Hmm.
be important here.
Definitely. And even too, like, with what you were saying with the image of my mother, how even though we couldn't see her face, it was more of her presence that we felt. that's what I think about when I see this image. We don't really see, these are my two cousins, and even though we don't see their face, their presence is, it's massively felt. And yeah, and this is another image that I took. Well, these four images right here. So the story behind that was my other cousin. I told him, hey, like, I don't have that many rolls of film. I only brought 4 rolls of film with me and like this cheap $10 camera. And it was during a state of emergency. So I was very limited to what I could bring with me. And I couldn't really take photos with my digital camera just because it was too big and it would cost too much attention. And so I told my cousin, I was like, hey, you can play with the camera, but if you're going to take your photos, just limit it to like, one or two images. And he ends up using the whole roll. And I remember seeing once the images were processed, I told myself, I was like, I have to create something out of this. And even that, like the question of, this isn't my photos. Like, do I have authority over it? And it just started, sparking other questions about photography and even representation and ownership of the image. And yeah,
That's great. Yeah, thanks.
of course. And so with the collection, there's over in total there's 50 images, and they go from very abstract from abstract to realism, in which I try my best to manipulate what a portrait could be and just push the limits of portraiture, and then also see how close I can get to depicting reality and everything between. And let me know if you want me to talk about a specific image.
Yeah, well, I definitely want you to talk about this one in particular. This is a favorite for a lot of reasons, and part of it's kind of technically what's going on, but part of it is this bigger question that I sort of keep coming back to, which is about how community becomes your subject. On one hand, like, you're taking pictures of what's around you, it's sort of daily life, but it also doesn't seem accidental that these things become the core subject. And I sort of wanted to ask you about that. Like, is there something about community or connection that is driving you, that is sort of in your mind ahead of time, or are you starting this by just exploring your world and community and connection sort of bubble up to the surface because that the fundamental sort of what matters to you? Is that, I guess it's a kind of a chicken or the egg question, I guess, but you're now at this point where you have a collection of work, and it seems to me like the through thread here is really about different inter-community connections. And I mean, I guess the question, another way of putting it, is how intentional was this, or is this sort of what you found?
Yeah, it goes back to the question of this image particularly. It goes back to the question of what am I not seeing? And to answer your question about why a lot of my photos revolve around community and people that I know, I feel like when with photography and filmmaking, one has to move with dignity, and to do that you need love and compassion, and that's something you can't give to everyone, just because it takes a long time to acquire those things. And for me, I really don't want to exploit anyone when it comes to imagery, and just because in ways that has become the norm, in which photographers go to other countries or other communities and take these images and then they leave. Rather, I want to just take images of people that are in my life, and I'm a big advocate of telling stories that are personal to you, just because you're the best one to tell them. And yeah, and this image here is of my best friend Brad and his son Solo. And prior to making this image, we were talking about fatherhood, and how he's a single father in his life, and how him coming up without a father, how that motivates him to really be in Solo's life. And we were just reflecting and talking about like how we could put that in a documentary form, and again really try to push the genre of documentary. And and things led to another. Solo spilled his food on his shirt. He needed to go, and then Brad took him to the bathroom to clean his face and whatnot, and in his shirt. And then I remember I was following them with my camera, and I was just like, hey, just stay right there. And again, the idea of what am I not seeing? And so with this image, even though it appears like it's 3 images, it's only 2, where you see Brad right here in solo, and you see Brad's reflection within the camera. Hmm.
Yeah, and this is one too where it really implicates you too, because in a way that you become more conscious of, you can, the reason why he's looking at you is because you're there looking in the mirror at him again. So it in some ways, the fourth wall disappears a little bit. You show
Hmm.
up even though you're not visibly present in this work.
Definitely. And even with the, the whole fourth wall, I feel like it should be broken a lot, just because, when with photography and even filmmaking, you know, the act of, we're trying to depict reality, but how close can we get? And, sometimes, the acknowledgement of the camera and the filmmaker, might help the legitimacy of telling that story. That's why I'm a big fan of Abbas Kiarostami,
Mm.
just because he'll even be in the films filming. You'll see, like, I remember that there was a scene within the film, and the main character walks past the director as he was filming a different movie,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just, I just love that, those type of things, just because, why lie? Like, why pretend like, the camera isn't there? The camera is there, just to address it. It might add it might make the image more interesting, and even the whole story more interesting.
Yeah.
So yeah. Hmm. And so, again, with portraits, trying to push the idea of what portraiture could be, and really just experimenting. And that practice of experimenting came from my little brother and sister, and I'm way more comfortable doing that with friends and family members than with other people. And yeah, and when I do take photos of other people, it's more of, I don't experiment as much, but rather, take what I've learned from the style of image making that I did with, with my family, and just recreate it with other people.
Yeah.
Mm. And yeah, and just trying to blur the lines between documentary and fine art and all those genres, because at the end of the day, we're taking an image. And so yeah. And even I remember when I first heard, like, when my friend asked me if I wanted to get into photography, I didn't really see the possibilities of what photography could be. And I thought it was just, I thought photography was just landscapes and animal photography. And now I'm becoming more interested in doing landscape photography, and seeing how my way of taking images and portraits could be, can lend itself when taking landscapes. Mhm. And this image here, this is of my good friend Zay. And 2 weeks prior to making this image, his grandma passed. And I remember him, telling me how, he would just tell me a lot about her, and how this one necklace, he would be touching it a lot, and just telling me that, like, it reminded him of her. And I remember when we were just walking around taking images. I really wanted to make an image for him, to show him that, like, hey, your grandma will always be there with you, even though if she's not here in the physical world. And so that's where the idea of making this image came, in which, his face is blurred out, and the only thing that's, really visible, well, the main thing that captures your attention is this shining light, and that light comes from the reflection of the chain
So
reflecting the light.
is this image, is he reflected in a surface, or is he through glass?
It's through glass.
Uh,
And again, with, after I restricted myself to, manipulating only in camera, I really did have to, like, find ways to, to blur out the face and whatnot. And a lot of and that forced me to, look, you know putting things in front of the camera, especially glass, dirty glass. And yeah.
well, it raises that question of the fourth wall again, which I saw we got a question in the comments about what the fourth wall is, and it shows up again in the gallery itself. And this is something we talked about the other day when we were in there, because you and I have been looking at these images back and forth on screen, where they're really bright, and when they're printed on paper and then they get framed and they get put under museum glass, they have a kind of reflective quality. And so your eye learns how to, like, avoid seeing yourself in it. But if you, in the galleries, when you're in there, you'll notice you can see yourself kind of mirror
Hmm.
reflected in the images. and it implicates the viewer a little bit. But can you, by way of kind of explaining what the fourth wall is, sort of explain how that's working in these images as well?
Hmm. Um, the breaking the fourth wall, or the fourth wall for me is, I'm not sure what the definite, you know, definition is for the fourth wall, but for me, it's just acknowledging the camera and the photographer. And I work in a way where, I work in a triangle where at one point you have the subject, at another you have the filmmaker, me, the photographer,
Yeah.
and then the third point is the audience.
Yeah.
And I really do want to connect all three, and usually it's by breaking the fourth wall, where not only my style of image making is felt, but also the subject is acknowledging myself as well. And
That's
the viewer, when they see the image, they're not only seeing the way the way I see, but then also the subject too.
yeah.
Yeah. So hopefully I answered that question. And yeah, and this image is a Polaroid image of my father, where you know it got damaged back in 2016, October 2016, during the Hurricane Matthew flood. And Hurricane Matthew, my parents' house got flooded, and I remember finding this once we were cleaning everything up. And it's funny because the cracks in this image, it's where his scars are at from his surgery.
Hmm.
Just to give you guys a brief explanation of what happened to him, he basically during surgery to remove his sinus infection, he ended up getting internal bleeding and a stroke on the left side of his body, and they needed to do an emergency surgery to fix that. And the scar that was left from that happens to be right here.
Hmm.
I remember seeing it, and I'm just like, this is so crazy that
Yeah.
that it happened right there. And
Yeah.
so yeah. Hmm. And then again, with the idea of portraiture, and then mixing it with landscape, and the idea of what am I not seeing is present within this image as well.
I want to talk a little bit too about the installation itself, because
Hmm.
there's yeah, here we are. Um, so there are two kind of multimedia qualities about this show. There are the music videos, which we'll talk about in a minute, and there's
Hmm.
also this booth, which it's like we've been kind of calling it back and forth, like the sanctuary, or like,
Hmm.
and it's a red curtained room, and then inside there's an audio installation, as well as a photograph that you keep private, that you don't share. We don't encourage photography in that space. And can you talk about what's going on in there? What's happening in that?
Hmm. I remember, when you first mentioned the idea of doing the show, this is like the first idea that I had to do. And basically, one of the reasonings for for me to even explore this was the idea of how people view photography, because all the other photos within this show, a good amount of them are available online for people to see, and eventually it'll become available online and whatnot. But I really wanted to keep this image, uh, solely exclusive to the show, and you needed to be there in person. And I really wanted to see how that affects the viewing of the image. And just because right now, like, with media and society, viewers don't really get the time and space to really take in what the piece is trying to tell them, or not even trying to tell them, but they can't really take in the piece both intellectually and emotionally. And I wanted to give people the space and time to do that. And the image here is an image of my father, but it's a sacred image in which I feel like depicts everything that's happened to him, and then also us. And with the audio installation, it's basically a recreation of what I would have heard if I was in the womb of my mother. And we have fragments of conversations my mother would have had back in Ethiopia with her friends and whatnot. And I wanted to juxtapose those two things, just because again, my family, like my family, my mom, my dad, are such a huge influence on my work, that I wanted to honor them in a way where not only that they're in the work, but then also we're kind of like manipulating time and kind of forgetting about time, where the image is of the present, and the audios of the past, and yeah.
Yeah, I really encourage people to check it out. The sound, there's parts where your mom is reciting the alphabet or vowels, and and there's sort of a kind of heartbeat quality to it as well. And it's pretty powerful when you're in that space.
Appreciate it. And
Um,
so,
then
yeah,
I think,
hopefully you guys can come and see it, because it is an
and
experience.
I think the next thing we could talk about is the other music component of the exhibition.
Yes,
Yeah.
definitely. And it's the Mereba trilogy, and it's basically within the exhibition are 3 films that I did with Mereba, who's an Ethiopian American singer, songwriter, producer, everything. She's amazing, and yeah, I guess Mereba, you could hop on because you've been here the whole time.
Hi.
Yeah. How are you doing?
I'm great. How are
Thank you
you?
for joining us. I'm going to step out while you all talk, but I'd love it if you could just talk about your collaboration, how you all came together, everything. Yeah.
For sure.
Sounds good. I'm gonna
This has been amazing so far. I just want to say, I'm learning a lot. So
How am I
thanks.
doing? How am I doing? Am I
You're
calm?
doing great. You're doing great. Go
Appreciate
Bears.
it.
Go Bears.
So basically, these are screenshots from the various films we did. This one being from Sandstorm, the music video for Sandstorm featuring Jid. The short film we did for the album The Jungle Is the Only Way Out. And then the first video we did for Planet U. And so I guess we can begin with, I guess we should begin with, how did we even connect? Because even the way we connected is kind of, the way it happened was crazy.
Yeah. So I was slightly familiar with your work through your book. Because our mutual friend, who's also an artist, Arima Adara, she had your book, and I saw it on her coffee table in her apartment, and I started looking through it and was like, wow, this is amazing. She's like, yeah, he's Ethiopian. I'm like, wow, that's amazing. So that was just kind of like, archived in my brain, and time passed, and I think I followed you on Instagram. I'm like, wow, his photos are so beautiful, cool. But we didn't really speak beyond that. And then I was looking for a director for my video for Planet U, and my video commissioner at my label, Marissa, who's amazing. Shout out to her. She was like, well, there's this young director that's Ethiopian. Maybe you guys will connect on your cultural ties. And I'm like, okay, send him to me. And it was you. And I was like, oh yeah, he's amazing. Like, this seems very, it seems like serendipity, or like some aligned thing that she would suggest you as one of, like, I think her first suggestion that she made. And so we moved forward and we talked, and like our first project together was Planet U. And yeah, that's the origin story.
Facts. Even it's crazy too, because on my side, when I got the email about Planet U, this was like a week before I moved to Brooklyn. So once everything was confirmed, September 1st of 2018, I moved into my apartment, and then I think like September 3rd, I was on a plane to LA, and I'm like, this is so crazy, because I would have never thought it would have been like this. And I remember after Planet U, you told me, you came up to me, you're like, yo, this is amazing. And I was like, okay, thank God. Because the whole time I was like a nervous wreck, because I was like, this is crazy. And I'm so glad.
It's always amazing working with you. And I know it's not stress-free for you, but you definitely make the environment stress-free for me. So I appreciate that.
No, definitely.
But yeah, it's been such a blessing to have been linked up and to like find a kind of kindred creative spirit on the visual side of things.
Definitely, yeah. And it's like, my whole thing is, telling, stories that are personal to you. And the fact that we were able to collaborate in, our Ethiopian roots, it was just a perfect match where, your music is already amazing. And then doing visuals for that was just, in ways it was easy, just because your music was so amazing.
Thank you.
And the connection we had was like, just the Ethiopian roots. It felt like it was more than music videos. It was like we were representing something bigger, And with that, I think we should talk about the short film "The Jungle Is the Only Is the Only Way Out," which is also the album title. I guess I would ask you, like, where did that title come from? Because that's such a powerful title.
The title came first, like, well, not first, but there were a few songs that I had made for the project already, not knowing that they were for a project necessarily, just making songs. I had made my song Heat Wave with Black. I had made Highway 10 and maybe a couple others, but I remember I was walking to work. I used to work with kids when I came out to LA, and it's very expensive here, obviously, so I was struggling, like capital S. And I was walking to the train on the way to work, and it just popped into my head, the title. And I think that at that time I was in a place of survival so much that I would leave little anecdotes for myself, like in my journal or whatever, to encourage me to keep going. And I think it was just kind of being in the flow of doing that sort of thing, writing little poems and stuff about what I was going through, that a channel was open for that title to just come to me. And as soon as it came to me, I was like, that's going to be my album title. And my debut album is going to be called that. And it's going to be about like getting through, I guess, kind of the challenges of coming of age and growing up and learning your place in the world, and also like how difficult it can be to just adult as a verb.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I remember, when you first told me about the short film, the idea of making the short film. And I remember, I think I asked you, I was like, hey, how do you feel about doing like a 7-minute or 8-minute film, but with only like 10 cuts? And, and I was like, I hope she because, a lot of the music videos that were out then, they were very, they were cut up super fast and everything. And it didn't really give people the time to really take in not only, what they're what they're seeing, but also what they're hearing, just because they were so distracted with so much information.
Yeah.
And I guess we should talk about how we tried our best to make this piece universal, just because, the album itself is universal and it could be felt by anyone from any time. And so when we were doing the film, even remember, there's a big spoken word element in which it basically ties the visuals, and the visuals itself are fragments of reality.
Yeah.
And I have a question for you. How did you feel when I first told you about the the idea of doing this 7-8 minute long thing and it being only 10 cuts, meaning there's a minute long scene?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it was exciting. From the beginning of this particular project, which I have to just say is my proudest thing that I've really done so far, is doing that with you and bringing my album to life in that way with you. Is it's something that I feel like I can be that much happier when I'm gone, because I'm we did that, but but I feel like I was just really excited because we had worked together to see the way that you interpreted that idea of I don't remember how I told you, but I was I want to tell basically my life story. There's not really a lot of frills. I don't really want a lot of extras, you know what I mean? I just want it to be something simple and just true and honest, but obviously I want it to be special visually. So how can we take a story that's honestly very universal and, nothing really out of the ordinary, just a young girl becoming a woman and falling in love or getting heartbroken and moving to a new city, and and your way of thinking about it from the beginning was just so creative in a way that I didn't know how to make that story creative. But I remember you came over and you were you were standing in front of me explaining what you wanted, and you were it was like a mime, you're acting out each thing, and I was just watching yeah, okay.
I remember that.
Let's do that.
And the whole thing too, when I get in that state, I have a bad, not even a bad habit, but if there's a chair around, I will get on top of the chair and I was please don't wild out. But I remember that moment.
No, I just remember sitting on my couch this is gonna be dope. Yeah. I was trying to keep up. But I loved that it was going to be, as far as your question of with the cuts in that situation, it felt like that was going to make it all that much more personal, because there was nowhere to hide or something cool to cut to, and it was very I'm exposed. But I think that was necessary for the story.
I remember the first scene that I thought of when when I was listening to the album and everything and prepping for the short film, it was the scene with you dancing. And I promise you not, I remember thinking of that scene, and I didn't think about anything else for 2 days. And I remember, Salim from, he was telling me, he's like, yo, are you done? And the deadline was approaching because we had we were on a tight schedule.
Yeah.
And for some reason, I just didn't want to do anything for those 2 days, just because that one scene, I was like, man, like, this is a super powerful scene. And even, like, without spoiling anything, the scene prior to that, not that many people know, but if you look closely, the guy in it, he looks directly into the camera and he breaks that fourth wall. And I remember when my friend asked, he was like, hey, you accidentally put that in there. And I was like, no, like, actually for like a whole 2 days during the editing process, I was wondering, should I remove that or should I not? And really it was just to respect, what people were about to see next, just because this wasn't, this film isn't just, a made up story. This is someone's real story in someone's life. And, to respect that, sometimes you do have to break that fourth wall and let people know that,
No, it's the scene with the dancing scene. I remember you like contacting me and being like, this is the idea that I have. And I'm pretty sure I cried, which is like not that out of place in my life, but I was like, just from reading your description of it, I was trying to figure out a way for a long time to capture like my relationship with my father who had passed in the process of me making the album. And it was kind of something I was like trying to kind of hide from, because I'm like, it's just gonna get too deep, I'm gonna get emotional, like, and that was like the first idea that you came with, and it was so deep and so emotional, and I'm like, okay, all right, I hear you, God, I'm just gonna dive into that, and like for me, that's my favorite scene from it, and it's like, it's really special for my family to have that scene,
Oh wow, yeah.
I don't want to interrupt y'all's flow, but there's this other moment in the film that you and I have talked about before, but I'd love to get your take on it as well, which is it's part of the party scene where you're sitting in the chair and the camera comes in really slow and you're in the far away, you're in another place, and then out of the blue a guy comes in from the side and you pop out and you acknowledge him and you come to life. And in the span of, a handful of seconds, which is a long time in a cut, it's a pretty long cut, you go through like dozens of emotions, and you can see it, even though you keep a pretty blank expression, you go through so many different feelings, and it's just legible there when you're looking at it. And Dawit and I have talked about that as being so powerful, right? He's breaking down these stereotypes and these representational tropes of sort of powerful woman, strong thinker, creative individual, and allowing you as a human to sort of go through your life on screen. And I wonder, like, how did that feel? Like you're exposed, you're really out there, and it's so moving when you see it in the film.
Yeah, I remember shooting that one. It's one of the first, I think, scenes that we shot, and on set it's like so quiet, and like I'm a performer, but I'm also like kind of a shy person by nature, and so I remember the camera zooming in, and at first I'm like, okay, should I act like I'm thinking about stuff? And then and then I was like, just actually think about the things that inspired this project to come to life, and I feel like we all have those moments when we're in a crowded room, and at least I have these moments all the time where I just zone out and I'm thinking about stuff that's really deep. I might be thinking about the state of the world. I might be thinking about something that happened in the past or whatever. And then it's like, you're turned back on to like, okay, now I need to be a functioning human again. But I think that is one of my favorite things about Dawit's work in general, is that like very personal, like almost uncomfortably intimate feeling that comes from like sharing something beautiful and a lot of times delicate, but like it has a darkness to it, or it has like a somber element to it. And I think that scene, I was just really thinking like, I'm so excited to be here. I'm on set, I'm shooting a video for my album. At the same time, been through a lot of stuff to get here, and that still exists inside of me. And at any time I could like go to that place and have to be pulled out from it. So it was scary, but in a very fulfilling way, definitely.
And it's like what you said about like how, you know, when you're zoning out, you know, a lot of people do that. And I think that's like, not think, but I know that that was our thing, trying to make it universal and let people know that, you know, you're not the only one that acts like this at parties, you know, when you're zoning out and everything. And it's a very normal thing. And I think we're trying to tell, and even with your album, just tell people how similar we are. Because I feel like for a long time, we've really focused on like, you know, like the 1% that makes us unique, but kind of failed to realize the 99% that makes us one. And I don't know, like that's one thing that that the short film does for me, is just show people how like how, you know, similar we are. And even, I guess this is a good segue into the spoken word bit, because you know, that scene with you know, the party scene, you know, we were basically hearing your thoughts. And you know, what was that process like for you? Because you know, we went through like
Yes, that was a very interesting part of the process of making the film, was like the spoken word element, because we both knew that we wanted that to like tie the themes together, basically. And I have like on my album, my interludes are 3 different spoken word like poems that I have on my album. So we kind of knew that that was part of the world that we were creating. And me being a writer, I was like, cool, I'll just knock that part out and it'll be super easy. And then I'll just give it back to Dawit and we'll just keep moving. And that was actually the thing that that was the last thing before we turned in the video, because we stayed up all night, like I think until sunrise.
Yeah, it was from 4 p.m. to like 6 a.m.
Yeah, because you know, I am a writer, but I have a way of, like, we wanted the story to be universal in the sense that other people could insert their life experiences into it and feel like held and understood within my life story, which a lot of times takes like not saying too much, you know? And I feel like I was like, this is my moment to tell my story, you know? But it really turned out to be a learning experience for me with that, because it was really my moment to tell a story. It's my story, but it's a story that is partially supposed to relate to other people and in their story. So a lot of Dawit's notes was like about simplifying, you know, and about saying less instead of saying more. And I was in my room, like in Ableton, recording my poems and then playing for him. He's like, it doesn't really work. Or, you know, what about taking this sentence out or whatever? He's trying to be super nice and not like offend me. But
you felt that?
Yeah, he was trying to, I felt that. But I just had to, like, he was just right. Like, as we were putting it into the film and seeing what worked and stuff, every time I simplified, it became more powerful, you know? And so that was the last step, but I think that it ended up being just so important to making it feel like a cohesive narrative, was like those few seconds where it sounds like I'm talking to my diary, but it's, you know, it was really amazing to collaborate on that part, because I'm not someone that's usually like, help me write something to people, but I feel like he added so much to that element of it by just telling me to simplify, you know?
And you know, like when I was telling you to like, hey, we should probably change it, I was like, how the hell do I tell her this?
Yeah.
I have I'm not a writer at all, but it's like, you know, again, simplifying it. And you know, like when you were talking, I was thinking about, like, you know, what is the role of the artist? Is it to tell their story and only their story, or is it, you know, with this privilege that we have of, you know, being artists, like should we use that privilege to, in ways, you know, we're telling our stories but also giving opportunities for other people to feel their story as well within the work. And so you know, how do you do that? And usually it's through simplification, because if you're putting too much information on something, you're not letting the viewer, you know, like for me, I'm a firm believer that, you know, for a viewer to really enjoy a piece of work, they need to put in some effort too. And a lot of times in the mainstream media now, like you know, a lot of the creators, they've done all the work and they've given you all the answers. And you know, like you want to give you want to make the viewers work, you know, to really appreciate something. Even with, you know, with love, like it's not a one-way street, it's a two-way thing where, you know, you're not going to agree, you're going to agree in everything. And it's like, even with art, it's a two-way street where, again, you know, I'm making a piece of work about my life, but also removing a tad bit of stuff so that way you could put your own interpretation into it and whatnot. And I think overall, like that's what you know, what the short film again does for me.
Definitely, absolutely.
We're starting to close in on an hour, and with what you were just saying, Dawit, I also want to acknowledge our guests who we've got a couple of questions that I just want to run through. But I do want to say as well that we're going to post links to y'all's websites so people can see the music videos and follow all of the creative work that both of you are doing. It's exciting to see what's happening, both of you, and it's really exciting for us to be able to support it this way. So thank you both for doing this. One question, a couple questions that we got were really technical, and I can probably answer those quickly, which is, the show was printed by, not by Dawit himself, but by a local printer in Williamsburg named Elliot Dudek, who's at William & Mary. And so he produced the prints, very generous with his time and support as well. And Dawit mentioned a little bit before, he does a little bit of correction in Photoshop, but there's no manipulation to the work really. It's really what is happening in the camera. The question that I'd like to pose to you, Dawit, is, reading it as I'm saying this, the person asked if you would share a bit about the history of your name, and particularly if you renamed yourself or if you're using your own name, and also where N.M comes from, if you're willing to say.
So I'm going to keep N.M a mystery, because you can't give everything, but
right.
I have a good answer for Dawit. I have a good answer for Dawit. So like, you know, when I first moved to America, you know, my first name was really hard for people to pronounce, and you know, it really made me stand out, especially like during attendance. You know, I'd always get questions like, "Where are you from?" Blah blah blah, and everything. And with the addition of, you know, the way mainstream media portrayed Ethiopia, you know, over the years, I kind of, you know, I wasn't proud to be Ethiopian anymore, just because of all the negative imagery I was seeing. And I did, like, in ways, you know, I was, you know, I was weak, and I didn't want to tie myself with that. And I didn't want to, you know, have that much attention toward me. So I went with the nickname Sam for a long time. And, you know, Sam is a perfect name where, you know, I could just go about life without anybody questioning anything, just because it's a very, you know, simple name. And around the age of 17, when I realized that I wanted to take this, you know, this filmmaking and photography a bit more serious, you know, I realized that, like, you know, Sam is a very basic name, and like there's so many other Sams, you know. And I was like, you know, I should really embrace my name Dawit. And you know, Dawit is Ethiopian for David, so it's a fairly basic name in Ethiopia as well. And you know, in that change of thought came when my mother told me about the Battle of Adwa, where Ethiopia defeated the Italians. And you know, they became the first, you know, they were like the only African country to not be colonized, and how that feeling of hope was dispersed throughout the whole continent. And I remember hearing that, and I'm like, yo, like, why didn't I learn about this? And you know, it wasn't that the information wasn't there, it was just that I wasn't there, and I was so busy trying to be American that I kind of didn't really, you know, take the time to cater to my Ethiopian roots and whatnot. And so as I moved forward, I realized, you know, I didn't want to disrespect anyone else by just having the name, you know, Dawit. And so I added N.M to it, so that way there was you know, I could, you know, I didn't want to take the name Dawit. I didn't want to be the only person with the name Dawit. So Dawit N.M, that's why the N.M, I added the N.M. And even with Dawit, it's funny too, because you know, in America, it's a super unique name, and you know, people are always asking me like, "Yo, that's like, you have a beautiful name and everything." But when I'm like, you know, talking to somebody like, you know, that's so rare, you know, that's from Ethiopia or whatever, they're like, "Oh, your name is Dawit," with like, along with the other 10 Dawit that I have on my phone. And it's and it's this beautiful thing though, because I'm realizing the power I have with my name, and because, from the side of the name Dawit, you already know that I'm an Ethiopian. And so I remember when somebody messaged me on Instagram, they're like, "Hey, I just saw your name on this video you did. I'm glad you're, another Ethiopian is out here doing amazing things." And that was my reasoning for, sticking with the name Dawit N.M, was just, people didn't have to see my face to know that I was Ethiopian. And, I'm a big advocate of representation in all aspects. And I wanted to, I wanted to represent Ethiopia as a filmmaker. And my name was just the perfect name for that, because it was so simple or
So
basic. Yeah.
we're definitely going to go over here, but I have one more question that came in that really is for both of you. And that's what are you working on now? What do we have to look forward to? Because we all need things to look forward to right now, and we'd love to know what's up next for both of you.
Do you want to go first?
I can.
Right.
I've been very re-inspired to write music that I've been working on a lot right now, and we work together on the visuals of things, and we have a few projects that we've been like coordinating, but especially the last month and a half or so has happened and gone down. I feel like I've been redirected, like spiritually, to make music that, as Nina Simone says, like reflects the times. And I've just been really zoned in and locked into making music that feels very honest to the times. And that's been uncomfortable, like I said before, because it's almost uncomfortably intimate, because I'm going through the emotions in real time about how I feel about, everything that's happening in the world. But yeah, that's what I've been doing. And I'm excited to see what we can kind of create from that once it gets to the point of it being visual. But I've just been putting like very little pressure on myself and just making music that I'm really.
You think that music will consolidate into an album at some point?
Yeah, I think like an EP or maybe an album. Yeah.
Amazing. I'll be waiting for it.
Yeah.
There's been amazing songs so far. For me to answer that question, I've been working on various things. One of them being I'm dipping into narrative work in terms of in film, and seeing how my visual style, how that works with dialogue and everything, and how what a story structure would look like. How I would structure a story, because I really don't want to do the traditional 3-act structure, but rather something a bit more different and a bit more free. And with the photo side, I'm working on a photo book, just because even with the whole COVID and everything happening, I'm realizing the privilege of the ability to move around freely, and even the privilege of going to see the museum. And this idea of the photo book, I've had it for the past 2 years, but I feel like now it's like the right time. And to really show people, especially my father, like he's not able to see the show due to him being in a nursing home. And so really just capture what I've captured in the exhibition, but through a book format, and what that would look like. And then even too, the other day, like my friend, sadly, he's in prison right now, and he asked me, he was like, "Yo, like I want to see the photos in the museum." And I printed all the photos in the museum, all 50, even that one photo that's exclusive to that the museum. And I shared it to him, and I'm so excited to see how he thinks, and like how that feeling is, even though with the whole situation he's in. And I think creating like a photo book of not just the photos in the museum, but also other things would be an interesting challenge and something fun to do.
That's great. I look forward to seeing that. I look forward to seeing what both of you all worked on. It's again really an honor that you all take the time today and be here and share your time with all of our supporters and friends out there in the virtual world who are looking at this. Thank you all again for taking the time, and thanks to our audience for participating. We posted both of the artists' websites in the comments, so please do check them out, follow them, check out what they're doing, and then check out our website as well to figure out the other talks that we're about to give. There's a lot coming up, a lot of virtual content, and we'd love to have you all participate in that as well. So with that, thanks everyone, and have a great day.
Thank you.
And come see the show if you can. We'd love to see you in person.
Appreciate y'all. Thank you.
Thanks everyone.
All right, y'all. Peace.
Bye.